Okay, let us continue. Florencia, completing the story of Ferdinand. Oh boy. An unpublished short story from the online collection set after Ferdinand's engagement is announced in Part 4, Volume 8. Elvira wails and curses the royal decree, prompting Rosemary to advise her to channel her emotions into something creative. Florencia watches over the newly founded Make Ferdinand Happy Squad to ensure their enthusiasm doesn't go overboard. It was late at night when the idea for this story struck me, but I couldn't resist the urge to start writing it. Looking back, the intensity of my enthusiasm was almost a little concerning. I wanted to support Florencia in her endeavors to restrain Elvira's own passionate writing. No way, I will not take a second wife, Sylvester declared. You don't want me to either, right, Florencia? This is not a decision to be made based on personal preferences. An Ob needs multiple partners, so I shall respond to yours as any duchy's first wife should. I consoled my husband as he threw yet another tantrum over his wish not to take a second wife. In our current situation, it was crucial to think carefully about which duchy Ehrenfest needed to strengthen its bond with most. Under normal circumstances, I would have turned to Elvira for her valuable input, but the unfortunate situation with Lord Ferdinand had thrown her into a rare state of emotional disarray. Oh, God. The same went for all her close friends. Of course, they're all fans of Ferdinand. They don't want to see him go. And we didn't either. Though, thankfully, he's in a happier place now. Thank God. Or, thank the gods, I should say. They spent their tea parties in tears and continued to weep as they bemoaned what hardships Lord Ferdinand must be going through. I thought it best not to ask for their advice until they calmed down. As for what that unfortunate situation was, a royal decree had demanded that Lord Ferdinand marry Lady Detlinde, who bore the features of the woman who had tortured him. Yeah, that fucking sucks. It was tragic, of course, but he could have avoided it by speaking with Sylvester first. Instead, he accepted the order thrust upon him and declared that his moving to Ahrensbach was the best outcome for Ehrenfest. Well, to be completely fair, it was the choice of either marry into Ahrensbach or kill Sylvester and take up the mantle of Ob. That's the only way. That's the only choices he had. So, yeah, he didn't really have a choice in the matter. Though then again, they don't know this. Fussing and complaining would neither change things nor serve him to any degree. Do you have any ideas, Rosamund? I asked. I thought she might attest that this was what Lord Ferdinand wanted, but she seemed to interpret my question in another fashion. Forcing down one's intense, raging emotions will only lead to trouble. Instead, why not channel them, your anger, sorrow, and regrets into the act of creation? My apologies, but what do you mean by that exactly? We could write a story based on Lord Ferdinand. There, if nowhere else, we could give him the happiness he deserves. I was stunned, unable to think of a response, but Elvira immediately spun around. Give him happiness within a story? That is correct, Rosamund said. Use pen and paper to guide him to a better future. Mother, having an outlet for your emotions should soothe you well. Elvira blinked her dark eyes and looked over her gathered friends. They turned resolute nods of approval, begetting what Rosamund would dub the Make Ferdinand Happy Squad. Once our meeting was over, Rosamund returned to the temple with her retainers. Lord Ferdinand was resigning as the high priest, and the sudden handover had given her plenty to take care of. In truth, Rosamund wasn't the only one with a lot on her plate. We needed to prepare farewell gifts for Lord Ferdinand, inform each of the upcoming change, and delegate his work to those who would remain in Ehrenfest. In the meantime, I'd taken to sitting in on tea parties to keep a keen eye on the Make Ferdinand Happy Squad. Her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, Elvira wrote out tragedy after tragedy. By our hands, the world shall understand Lord Ferdinand's misfortune. I could not help but sigh. A story too openly critical of the newest royal decree would only land our duchy in hot water. Not that anyone here was in the right mind to care. Yeah. How can I encourage them to make the story more discreet? I paused and thought before airing my solution. As much as I support conveying his misfortunes to others, consider what might happen if people learn the truth. The story could be confiscated. Very well, very true, Elvira said. We cannot allow a repeat of the tragedy of the Harshfield concert to occur. Yeah, I agree. Quite, her entourage agreed. I could not bear to taste such bitter despair again. Nobody must know that we are writing about Lord Ferdinand. Change the character. Make it a woman. Change the name. Upon learning that we had sold artwork depicting him during his Harshfield concert, Lord Ferdinand had banished ever making art of him again. Elvira's and the others' cries still rang in my ears. I sensed the entire squad unite in their mutual goal to never let such a thing happen again. But how can we keep the true identity of our protagonist hidden? Changing the name will do nothing if we still write about a tragic Archduke candidate from Ehrenfest being forced by royal decree into an engagement with the Greater Duchy. A relieved sigh escaped me as everyone focused on obscuring the inspiration for their story. A man being made by royal decree to marry into another duchy is rather rare, now that I think about it. Yeah, that's gonna get people to figure it out, because it's not very often that happens. Indeed, it was more common for women to marry into other duchies than men. A groom being ordered about in such a manner was rare enough that anyone in the current climate would put two and two together. Determining which parts of the story to change to complete our trickery was no simple matter. What if the decree came from an Ob, not the king, I asked. Lady Florencia, that would do nothing to convey the heartless cruelty of a royal decree. Indeed, I must object, it might also paint Ob Ehrenfest in a poor light. Yeah, you don't want that. Certainly. I conceded rather quickly. As the others had said, we could not risk our work impacting Sylvester's reputation. If our aim is to be discreet, then why not have a woman marry into the duchy? Someone whispered. I did not catch who, but Elvira immediately looked up with a start. That's it! What is it, Lady Elvira? We shall write as though Lord Ferdinand were a woman. Nobody should piece together the truth then. A fresh wave of confusion rendered me speechless. If we changed the sex of our protagonist, I thought our story would cease to be about Lord Ferdinand. I thought the others might agree with me, but a quick look around revealed I was alone in my opinion. Everyone else seemed quite taken with the idea. I mean, all you gotta do is change the name and sex and still keep the story of what you're doing, and it should be fine. How wondrous! Not a soul would make the connection. Not to mention we are sure to win our raiders' empathy. Many of our country's nobles were moved into other families before being baptized, and endured great hardships growing up as a result. Granting her happiness at the end will inspire those in unfortunate circumstances to have hope. I suspected that Elvira and the others turning Lord Ferdinand into a woman would only bring him greater misfortune, though I elected not to say anything. Only way that would is if someone figured it out, even then. And the only ones who I think know outside that little group is probably Rosemine. Because Ferdinand still hasn't figured it out. Our most important goals are masking his identity and concealing anything that might be seen as critical of the royal family. I should welcome any alterations that turn this into a completely separate story. And we absolutely must include romance at the Royal Academy, one of the women cried. Such tender moments are precisely what the young noble women who read Lady Elvira's stories want. That reminds me, does anyone else remember the rumors of Lord Ferdinand getting close with the princess at the Academy? Perhaps we could include a love story with the prince? Excellent, we should make her a woman so bright, beautiful, and bold that a prince would naturally fall in love with her. But because she lacks a mother, the prince's family shall reject the pairing. Amid giddy cries of glee, the protagonist's relationship with the prince was settled. It was good to see everyone smiling again, and with such a major change to the plot, nobody would assume it was actually about Lord Ferdinand. Yeah! Like I said, only Rosemary, I think, figures it out. And she wants to probably say something, but I'm like, yeah, you don't want to tell Ferdinand this. The prince will plead with the king for the royal decree to be taken back until at long last he succeeds. He and our protagonist shall win the romance they so desire. Wait, I feel as though I've heard this tale before. Yes, because it mirrors the situation with Prince Anastasius and Lady Eglantine. Let us use them as our inspiration. That will make readers even less likely to think about Lord Ferdinand. Yeah, pretty soon we're going to get to a point where it's not even about Ferdinand anymore. Elvira's group seemed satisfied with their general outline of the plot and the pleasant conclusion they had devised for its main character. From there, they considered the details, wondering whether their gender swap should also apply to Sylvester's equivalent and the protagonist's retainers. Now, what should we name our main character, Elvira asked? We've changed enough of the story that we can preserve the connection here, no? I fear I won't be emotionally invested otherwise, which will completely forestall my writing. Everyone fell into deep thought. Several ideas were put forward until they finally settled on Fernestine, an oh-so-clever mix of Ferdinand and Eglantine. Sylvester's equivalent would remain the protagonist's paternal half-brother and protect Fernestine from his mother. Both found consideration for me and to add excitement to the opening acts, which were otherwise lacking in romance. It speaks to Elvira's dedication that she changed even her own son into a female knight for the sake of this story. I shall accept her consideration with gusto. Now, let us consider which of Lord Ferdinand's many legends to work into our tale. Yeah, you can have a figure that one out. The resulting manuscript was passed to Bertilde, an apprentice attendant currently training under Elvira, and printed in Groschel. Haldensdale printed only in the winter, and Lord Ferdinand had too many eyes in the temple. Elvira's story ended up being so long that, much like Dunkelfelger's history books, it had to be divided into volumes. The first covered the protagonist's baptism as an archduke candidate, her abuse at the hands of her stepmother, her going to the Royal Academy with her half-brother's protection, and her falling in love with the prince. Rosemine saw the completed book before going to the Royal Academy and stared at it stunned. Mother, this protagonist might be a woman, but isn't this a story about Ferdinand? She figured it out quick! She and Sylvester had noticed it once because, yeah, they're close to Ferdinand. Of course they would know this stuff. But only because they were so close to Lord Ferdinand, as only those in his inner circle could see the connection. It ended up being a rather well-made tale that was harmless to most, but poignant to those in the know. Oh my, but this has been a work of fiction, Rosemine. Names, characters, businesses, and events are all the products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. I can only hope Lord Ferdinand finds that convincing. Okay, that was a short one. Tuuli, self-awareness amid everything. A sales bonus story for Part 4, Volume 8, set during the run-up to Corinne's return to Klassenburg. It explores how marriage is seen by lower-city merchants and how Tuuli felt about Benno and Corinne's relationship. Oh, we're gonna get into this, eh? Yeah, I kind of got spoiled on something. We will see if it actually pops up. The bonus short story for the second drama CD depicted the blossoming of this first love, though Tuuli had yet to recognize it. I wrote this installment to pave the way for what comes next for her. Benno's quite a catch, so he's sure to have opened many women's eyes to the world of romance. We were seated around the fireplace, listening to the wood crackle and pop as we made a hairpin for the royal family. I glanced up from my hands and the complexly woven threads I was working with, decided that the fire needed more fuel, and then returned to my work. Tuuli, I'm done, one of the Laharls said. How's your work coming along? Think you've finished in time? Probably. The order came earlier this year, and we've already had the thread we needed, so we'll have more wiggle room than before. Your prediction was spot on. Before, we'd made these hairpins in a panicked rush, feeling as though the walls were closing in around us. This time, however, I'd expected us to receive an order from the royal family, and the atmosphere was far more relaxed as a result. We even had the leeway to chat as we worked. Things have been quite calm this time around, but what about next year, one of the Laharls asked, looking worried. Aren't you going to spend the winter with your family? Since you haven't come of age, I mean, is that not bound to cause problems? Yes, I plan to hole up at home next year to make my coming-of-age dress. My birth season was summer, so I would wear the same clothes when I eventually married. I wanted to put my all into them as a Laharl of the Gilberta Company. Every stitch needed to be perfect. You're all going to be fine, I said with a chuckle. You have Ganilla. Ganilla? Whatever. In terms of making hairpins, Ganilla was one of our better Laharls. She was improving by the day, and as an adult, usually accompanied Mr. Benno or Mrs. Carita when they went to the nobles' quarter to take hairpin orders. There wouldn't be any issues next winter with her around. It was a relief, of course, but it also made me envious. I need to hurry up and come of age, too. Each time she attended a meeting with nobles, Ganilla's mastery of etiquette reached even greater height. As it stood, she could take orders directly from members of the nobility without even batting an eye. I couldn't shake the feeling that my position as Lady Rosemine's personal hairpin craftsperson was at risk. No, it's not. You're her big sister. She's not gonna have anybody else do it but you. Given how much she relies on you, Ganilla, you might not want to get married until after Tuuli comes of age, one of the other Laharls said. It'll be a nightmare if you both left at once. As if, another chimed in, we'd manage just fine without them. If anything, we'd all be telling Lukey to quit sweating the small stuff. Like, come on, pop the question already. Right, Tuuli? Lukey? Oh, that's... okay. Ganilla gave a slight smile. Lukey was her boyfriend, but he'd said that he didn't want to propose before his income was larger than hers. Even when two people were in love, there were plenty of obstacles on the road to marriage, it seemed. Speaking of marriage, I wonder what Mr. Benno plans to do. He ran this store before switching to the planting company. If, as we all suspect, he's going to get married this summer, then we should do something to celebrate. It won't be that long before purveyors from other duchies arrive, so the sooner we start preparing ourselves, the better. Married? Oh, you mean to that girl from Klassenburg. I saw them wandering between stores this one time. They seemed real close. They're bound to end up together. Especially with how much it'd benefit Mr. Benno's store. Every store in Ehrenfest knew about the Klassenburg merchant who had gone home without his daughter. And as connections to greater duchies were such a valuable source of income, so valuable that even the guildmaster clamored for them, everyone agreed that Mr. Benno would marry her for sure. Mr. Benno getting married? I'd seen him and the girl from Klassenberg, Corinne, together at the end of autumn when I'd gone out to buy thread. Gunilla was right when she said they seemed close, and they certainly were a good match. Still, hearing the others go on about the potential marriage made me annoyed and a little bit anxious for some reason. Lutz said otherwise, I noted. Mr. Benno's looking after her for complex reasons and doesn't intend to marry her. Really? But she's the daughter of a Greater Duchy's purveyor. There's no good reason for Mr. Benno to turn her down. True. However, he's not going to get married because he is still hung up on Liz, and yeah, he's not going to. If anything, I'm surprised that the Guildmaster hasn't tried to get her to marry any of his kids, or his grandkids, you know? I'm surprised he hasn't tried that yet. Lutz's word as a Laharl apprentice of the planting company should have carried more weight, but nobody seemed to pay it any mind. The truth didn't matter to them. They only wanted to gossip while they worked. So they carried on as though the marriage were set in stone. Her name's Corinne, right? She is a beauty, and a talented merchant too, apparently. A girl from the Greater Duchy and the head of the planting company. They've got so much money between them. I can't even imagine how fancy their ceremony is going to be. Oh my god, quit thinking about it. It's not happening. If that were me, I'd order new furniture from the Ingo workshop. He's a Gutenberg, no? From there, the others started sharing which stores they'd order from when they married, which turned into excited chatter about the best stores and carpenters, which then led to them gossiping about their partners. I gave half-hearted replies while repeating Lutz's words in my head over and over again. Mr. Benno won't marry a random girl from Klassenberg. No matter how attractive she might be, he'd never risk her getting access to sensitive information and putting mine in a worse position. Lutz had given me that reassurance when he saw how anxious I was about the rumors of Mr. Benno getting married. It really had helped me to put me at ease. I trust Lutz and Mr. Benno more than I do irresponsible gossip. Once the royal family's order was complete, it was time to make products for summer. We got straight to producing hairpins of all price ranges for the purveyor merchants due to arrive from other duchies. Master Otto and Mrs. Karina had said that our hairpins were popular now since they were new and reasonably hard to come across, but that other duchies would eventually learn to make their own. We had to sell as many as we could before then. I was still making hairpins when winter came to an end. A summons from the Gutenbergs came from the temple, Lutz said. The high priest is going to attend us, so Master Benno wants to limit participation to select members of the Plantain and Gilberta companies. Is there anything you want Lady Rosemont to know? Beyond what we've already covered, I mean. This meeting can mainly be about the Gutenbergs' long-term trip and their wishes for the upcoming Archduke conference. Lutz said there had been a similar discussion during the sales gathering in the castle, when most of the agreements had been worked out. Nope, and we appreciate the planting company taking the lead to protect us, Master Otto said. We're in your care. Lutz nodded and went to leave. I moved to stop him. Lutz, can you tell me what comes up during the meeting, I asked. Is everything okay? I mostly remember the high priest from the you-know-what contract. The thought of any meeting that involves him makes me nervous. Hearing that he would be there made my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't help but recall his quiet demand that we give up mine and let her be reborn as a noble. I was desperate to know what he might say this time. I'll need to drop by home before I go on my trip, so I'll tell you then, Lutz said, as much as I can at least. Thanks. Relieved I saw him off. Blessed be the melting of the snow. May the goddess of spring's boundless magnanimity grace you all. Let's arrive at the Gilberta company with the usual seasonal greeting. Today was the day we were both going home. He wanted to see his parents before leaving for his trip, and I wanted to hear about his meeting with the high priest. I changed into simpler clothes than usual, at which point my colleagues all shot me bantering smiles. Well, aren't you lucky having a boyfriend to walk you home? Bye-bye. Make the most of your time together before he has to leave. Yeah, they're all assuming that Lutz and Tuuli are a thing, which at this point I'm not sure if they are. I know they eventually get engaged because of what happens in the last book, but I don't know when this happened. Maybe we'll get that? Lutz and I shared a look, shrugged, and went on our way. Trying to correct them would only lead to more teasing. No sooner had we stepped outside than the cold wind pricked my cheeks. We'd passed into spring, at least according to the calendar, but snow still covered the city's roads. A few people were scattering ash to help it melt, and rattling wagons kicked up the resulting slush as they drove by. Hey, let's take this alley to keep off the main street. Sure, we'll catch colds at this rate, and the fewer wagons we have to deal with, the better. Yeah, you don't want to get covered in slush. At this time of year, continuing south from the central plaza meant having to cross any number of wagon pullers calling for help. Lutz wanted to avoid them as much as I did, so we turned a corner and continued on our way. Yeah, you don't want to have to keep stopping, because then you'll never get home. Until we spotted someone we both recognized. Wait, isn't that Mr. Benno? I exclaimed, my voice brightening. It was rare to see him in this part of the city. I went to approach him, but froze when I noticed the red-haired woman beside him. She was just tall enough to reach Mr. Benno's shoulders, and trudged along as if she had never had to traverse a snowy road before. Mr. Benno was doing what he could to assist her. The young woman ahead of us had to be Corinne. From where we were watching them, she and Mr. Benno really did appear to be lovers. Anyone who saw them now would absolutely assume they were destined to get married. Corinne's slow, awkward lumbering through the snow meant we quickly started catching up to them. I slowed down, trying to keep my distance, but Lutz sped up and called out, Master Benno, are you going to the Merchants Guild? Oh, Lutz, you two headed home? Mr. Benno asked, turned to us with a grin. He stopped so suddenly that Corinne almost stumbled. Benno, that was dangerous, she snapped. I'd guessed from the moment I'd seen her that she was as strong-willed as she was beautiful, and it seemed that I was right. She narrowed her blue eyes at him. Isn't that strange? Why is she addressing Mr. Benno so casually? She might only have a temporary employment contract, but she still works as the planting company. To add to my surprise, Mr. Benno didn't even call her out for it. He simply said, whoops, my bad, treating her reaction as though it were the most normal thing in the world. Yeah, I think he's just getting used to being around her, but at the same time, he's obviously not gonna keep her around because he's gonna send her home as soon as he can. Stranger still, he didn't seem bothered that we'd caught him out and about with Corinne. I suddenly found it hard to breathe. So, Lutz, who's the girl with you? Corinne asked, eyeing me curiously once she was steady on her feet. Won't you introduce me? Wasn't she acting far too comfortable around Lutz as well? Or maybe my anger was just getting the better of me. They were both employees of the same store. Yeah. Lutz exchanged a look with Mr. Benno, then frowned. This is Tuuli, he said plainly. We've been friends since we were kids. That mustn't have been the answer Corinne wanted as she knit her eyebrows at him. Friends, Surely that can't be all. She shot me a glance and her lips curled into the same knowing smile my co-workers always gave me. Even she thought we were a couple. Blood rushed to my head. I'd come to terms with the others teasing me and Lutz. There was no stopping them after all, but I didn't want Corinne yapping about us in front of Mr. Benno. Yes, friends, I said. That's all we are. I see. Childhood friends. How nice, Karen giggled, completely unfazed by the sharpness of my response. I couldn't help but feel that she was treating me like a kid. Well, I mean, you still are technically a kid. Tuuli, this is Corinne, Mr. Benno noted, introducing her at last. She's the daughter of a Klassenberg merchant, and right now, she's a planting company Lahange. Nice to meet you, I said. You, don't seem used to being out in the snow. Don't you get any in Klassenberg? Lutz told me tales of the weather in Holdensdale, and Klassenberg was said to be even colder. I couldn't be the only one who thought Corinne's trouble with the snow was a little suspicious. I don't have my snowshoes, she explained. We get plenty of snow back home, but we don't see it much in our subterranean cities. Corinne pointed at the ground, prompting me to stare down at my feet. The snow in Klassenberg was apparently so bad that its people had moved underground, largely circumventing the need to traipse through it. I couldn't even picture such a place. Some of the bugs here at Erebus made their nests in the dirt. Maybe these subterranean cities were a massive version of that? Maybe? I'd actually like to see some of the other duchies. That would be cool. So, Master Benno, you're headed to the Merchants Guild, aren't you? Lutz asked, purposely moving the conversation along. I waited to hear Mr. Benno's response, barely able to contain my nerves. If he was trying to keep Corinne out of the loop, then it didn't make sense for him to take her to an important meeting. Mr. Benno waved dismissively and pointed to a used clothing store. Corinne doesn't have any clothes for spring. She's going to buy some while I take care of business with the guild. As it turned out, Mr. Benno had only come along to get Corinne a discount. I was glad to hear they weren't going to the same place. Be careful on your way home, Mr. Benno said to us, and with that we went our separate ways. Lutz and I proceeded down a road where the snow lay thicker than usual, maybe because so few people came here. All was quiet except for the crunching of our footsteps. Whew, Lutz exhaled. You had me worried for a moment there, Tuuli. I thought you might let slip that you worked for the Gilberta Company. Huh? Would that have been a problem? Hairpins are a majorly big deal to these purveyors. Once they learn to make their own, they can dominate the market for them back home. That's why you were told not to wander around carelessly last summer, remember? Lutz was right. Before winter, when the purveyors had still roamed the streets, we'd been told to have someone, preferably a boy, escort us wherever we went. It had completely slipped my mind now that the visiting merchants were gone, and we weren't always being told to be careful. Corinne was the daughter of a purveyor. I really should have been more cautious around her. Instead, I was busy being mad about her treating Lutz and me as a couple in front of Mr. Benno. I needed to pay more attention in the future. The entire planting company must be on guard against Corinne, huh? I said. Yeah, it was always the plan for someone to escort Corinne out of the store today, since we had to prepare some documents for Klassenberg. I just didn't think Mr. Benno would do it since he had business with the Merchants Guild. There was nothing wrong with Corinne seeing clothes or other such belongings, but he wanted to keep documents related to the planting and plant paper guilds well away from her. Oh, I see. The moment I understood why Corinne was with Mr. Benno and that the whole store was working to hide sensitive information from her, my stress vanished. I could feel my footsteps lighten with my mood. So what did the Gutenbergs discuss in the temple? Well, we're going to Leisgang next, he said, sharing as much as he thought he could. To start with, they had apparently requested a new workshop in Leisgang's lower city. Lady Rosamund's mattress had also been delivered to the temple, and the high priest had found it so impressive that he'd ordered another. Zach was raving about how the Verde workshop was going to do business with the entire Archducal family. Was there a reason the high priest had to be there? I'm assuming he's Rosamund's guardian still at this point. He wanted to know about the Faystone store and what happens when we mess up butchering babies. It was stressful as heck. I was the only one who had any answers. Mr. Benno normally answered questions since he was used to doing business with nobles, but neither he nor Mark ever hunted in the forest, butchered babies, or patronized the Faystone store. Very few craftspeople were educated on how to speak to nobles without seeming rude, so Les had been understandably tense when responding to the high priest. You didn't mess up or get yelled at, did you? I asked. Nah, it was fine. The high priest has been looking after Lady Rosamund since her days as a blue shrine maiden, and he never took issue with how my mom and dad speak. He's not the sort of person to mind if a commoner doesn't behave exactly as nobles would expect. If you continue to do it, though, I think he might get a little annoyed. My core memories of the high priest came from when he'd taken mine away. Les, on the other hand, saw him as someone who generously listened to everything his family had to say and helped them stay together. Look, I said, I get how much he's doing for Lady Rosamund's sake. It's just hard to keep these emotions in check. I decided to drop the matter and simply continue down the road. The lull in our conversation made the crunching of the snow all the louder. Les eyed me from the side and let his mind wander. What did we talk about next? Oh, right. Lady Rosamund asked about Corinne and Master Benno. Really? What did Mr. Benno say? He declared then and there that he won't marry her or do anything else to disadvantage Lady Rosamund or the Archduke. At the castle, he even advised them to push for Corinne's father to be punished, both to give Ehrenfest an edge against Klassenberg and to prevent something like this from happening again. Yeah, you definitely need to nip that in the bud before anything else like that happens. Really, that's wonderful news. Thank goodness for Mr. Benno. I was so glad that Lady Rosamund had broached the subject. Thanks to her, I now had an answer to the question that was preying on my mind. Had she still been mine, I would have given her a big hug and as many head pats as she could ever want. I started to hum, but Lutz stayed silent. This time I shot him a glance. He was watching me closely. Uh-oh. Here we go! Here we go! The one question everybody has been wanting to know. Tuuli, do you like Mr. Benno? What? Lutz's question took me completely by surprise. I stared at him dumbstruck, then burst into laughter. Where did that come from? I'm just worried about Lady Rosamund in the store. Really? Really? Mr. Benno runs a huge store, is way older than me, and would never take an interest in someone who hasn't even come of age. I think he's amazing. I really do. But that's all. Don't be weird. Yeah, this actually gets brought up in some story or something, some side story that got translated or something. And yeah, I was curious, actually, as to what she would say. Lutz cocked his head at me, unconvinced. Mr. Benno would laugh if he heard you say that out of nowhere. Don't let anyone know you asked me, okay? Not that he ever would. I already knew he wasn't the kind of boy to gossip. The snow had finally melted when Les and his fellow Gutenbergs departed for Gleisgang. The sun grew brighter with each passing day until on a morning that felt distinctly like the coming of summer, the Archduke Conference began. We commoners couldn't attend, but it had an enormous impact on our lives. So important was the conference that a meeting was held to discuss it. I was surprised to hear that the high priest was marrying into Ahrensbach and that Lady Rosamund might be in danger again. But what shocked me most was a piece of news about Mr. Benno and the Guildmaster. The former's decision not to marry Corinne had apparently been made without the latter's approval. Why does he need approval? Which had resulted in a fierce argument between the two. The Guildmaster had wanted to force their union to strengthen Ehrenfest's connection to a greater duchy, but Mr. Benno had borrowed the power of nobles to refuse him. In the end, the Guildmaster had turned bright red and said in no uncertain terms that Mr. Benno's stubbornness had cost Ehrenfest the best result for the merchantry. But, well, there's no helping that. It just goes to show how little Mr. Benno wanted to marry Corinne. Yeah, like I said, he's still hung up on his old love. Once the Archduke conference was behind us, it quickly came time for the purveyors of other duchies to arrive. Corinne's family had since been demoted, so Mr. Benno would entrust her to another purveyor from Klassenburg. Master Otto claimed the negotiations had concluded with Ehrenfest demonstrating it wasn't at fault, securing Corinne's safe passage home, and leaving Klassenburg to settle its own problems. And the entire time, our representatives had wielded Lady Rosemine's authority like a great club. Gotta use everything we can, apparently. Under normal circumstances, Master Otto was too focused on Mrs. Karina to think about much else, but as a former traveling merchant, he knew just how dangerous it would be for a young lady like Corinne to attempt the long trip back to Klassenburg alone. His concern for her seeped through his every word. Summer ended, the wind grew colder, and the purveyors began returning to their homes. Again? Good lord! Klassenburg's merchants had prepared to leave earlier than most, as winters in their duchy were particularly rough. On the day the Klassenburg merchants gathered to depart, I got together with the others to see them go. I was a little worried that Corinne wouldn't actually leave, and that she'd simply be left behind again. We were joined not only by the employees of the inns where the purveyors had stayed, members of the Merchants' Guild, and merchants from major stores, but also by a bunch of curious onlookers. Amid the crowd headed to the west gate, I focused my attention on Corinne and Mr. Benno. Benno, she said, thank you for everything. I'm grateful to have come to Ehrenfest and glad to have spent time at the planting company. Not that I've forgiven my father for leaving me here in the first place. For someone who had been abandoned by her dad, turned down for marriage, and then told to return home, Corinne seemed to be doing surprisingly well. Her time at Ehrenfest couldn't have been easy on her, and she was bound to face plenty of hardships back in Klassenburg, but she still wore an unbeatable smile. Though my opinion of her hadn't been too positive, I couldn't deny that she was a strong and incredible woman. And don't ever forgive him, Mr. Benno said, the kindness in his dark red eyes, a silent declaration that he didn't want her to leave. Fight back as much as you can. The compassion in his gaze was unlike anything I'd seen before, and it hurt so much that it felt like someone had grabbed my heart and squeezed. I guess he grew fond of her a little bit, but not in that way, obviously. I would imagine more like a little sister. Why? Why is he looking at her like that? I'd be wondering that too, because, I mean, he did declare that in no uncertain terms that, yeah, I'm not marrying her. The answer was obvious. I just didn't want to admit it. Mr. Benno had special feelings for her. No, he doesn't. He thinks of her, I'm assuming, and like I said, in a little sister type way. I don't think he thinks of her in a romantic way. Because otherwise, he would have agreed to the marriage. But he didn't. So, what are you going to do now, he asked. Your dreams surpassed mine, so perhaps I'll try to surpass yours. Corinne gave Mr. Benno a teasing smile, and kissed him on the cheek and then turned away as she went to join the Klassenburg merchants. Mr. Benno placed a hand on his cheek and grimaced. Oh, yeah, he didn't like that. But he never looked away from Corinne as she slowly shrank in the distance. Pain and anxiety swirled in my chest as I watched them grow farther and farther apart. Don't treat me like a kid, I managed to say. Oh, wait, dang it. What the fuck? Oh, here we go. And once the merchants had departed through the west gate, the crowd returned to their normal routines. A cold autumn wind blew as Mr. Benno lowered his eyes, then finally turned around. That was when he saw me. Hey, Tuuli, didn't know you were here too. He was wearing his usual smile, the kind he reserved for those close to him, but it was completely devoid of the passion he'd just shown Corinne. He gave me a casual pat on the head as he'd done so many times before, only this time it did nothing to excite or embarrass me. It just made me feel pathetic. Okay, here we go. Don't treat me like a kid, I managed to say. Ah, right, my bad, he said, grinning as though it were nothing. Then he went on his way. As I watched Mr. Benno leave, I was overcome with the urge to cry. This was all wrong. I didn't want him to treat me as his niece or whatever. Oh god. Yeah, she does like him. She didn't realize it though. Though, I mean, who could blame her? Benno's awesome. I wanted the same passionate look he'd given Corinne, but it was only normal for Mr. Benno to treat me like a kid. It had never even occurred to me that he was locking away his emotions to prioritize his duties as the head of the planting company. I hadn't noticed him pushing down his love so that he wouldn't be inconvenienced, Lady Rosamine or the Archduke. Or so that he wouldn't inconvenience Lady Rosamine or the Archduke. How cruel must I have seemed for celebrating her return home and her family's punishment. I started to follow Mr. Benno, my eyes glued to his back. It wasn't long before I accidentally bumped into someone. Maybe because the Central Plaza was so crowded, or maybe because I wasn't looking where I was going. I wobbled and barely managed to stay on my feet, but that brief distraction was enough for me to lose sight of Mr. Benno. I sat by the fountain, somehow feeling like a lost child. There weren't even any kids playing in the water. I wish I were an adult already, I muttered. It was a senseless desire. I already knew that growing older wouldn't change how Mr. Benno saw me. He'd met plenty of women, but hadn't looked at any of them in the same way that he looked at Corinne. There must have been something special about her. I'm still willing to bet that he just thinks of her as family. Maybe. I don't know. Still, I didn't want to be a child anymore. I can't believe I feel this way. I wish I'd never noticed. I couldn't stand the thought that I had been comparing myself to Corinne, envying her, seething with jealousy, and jumping for joy over her return home. Suddenly, I remembered Les asking me whether I'd fallen for Mr. Benno. I probably had even back then. I must have come up with reasons to explain it away so that I wouldn't have to face these doomed feelings of mine. I feel so stupid. Let's noticed so long ago. My cheeks grew hot as I cast my eyes down. Tears fell onto my lap. Let's was right, I murmured too quietly for anyone to hear. Thank God nobody heard you. I do love Mr. Benno. As the busy crowd thronged around me, I experienced love and heartbreak for the very first time in my life. Yeah, that was bound to happen, dude. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that Benno was attracted to Corinne, or do you think that I was right, that he thinks of her like family, like a potential little sister? Because I highly doubt that he's moved on from his original love, Liz, from what I could tell. Okay, let's continue. Okay, Gunther. Soldiers and knights gathering intel. A sales bonus story for Part 4, Volume 9 that takes place around the time Aaron Fest's Bible was stolen. It shows the incident in the temple from the perspective of Gunther, the commander of the North Gate. Daniel and Angelica arrive at Rosemine's order, and the three gather what information they can in a bid to save the four kidnapped Grey Priests. Gunther's attitude and enthusiasm make him a fun character to write. He has a growing relationship and trust with Daniel, who just keeps getting stronger and works closely with him to protect his daughter. What a good dad. Yeah. Hey, Gunther. I turned to look at Olis, my assistant. He was a competent guy for the price of 5 small silvers, kept things running at the gate when I escorted the temple's priest to Haas. I really did owe him a lot. If not for his hard work, there was a chance I wouldn't have been able to reunite with mine. Don't tell me we've got another noble's carriage at the North Gate, I said. That's exactly it. Give me a break. The last one hasn't even passed through. I groaned and together with Olis, started making my way to the top of the gate, which would give us a good view of the entire city. The carriage houses between us and the temple's front gate were especially helpful. A noble on board said there wasn't anyone at the temple's gate to let them through, Olis groused. So no clue what's going on. Shouldn't there be guards stationed there at this time of year? I was just confused. It was the time of the year when nobles started showing up for winter socializing. They came from all over Ehrenfest, and many of them were weary and irritable by the time they reached our city. For that reason, the gate guards needed to be careful now more than ever. It was no time to just randomly disappear. Had only one carriage not been able to pass through the gate, I might have assumed the noble was at fault. But this was our 6th complaint so far. So this is where you lot have been, I said. We don't want to be anywhere near the knights or nobles. 2 guards normally stood at the top of the gate, but right now it was packed. Everyone had decided to evacuate here, it seemed. I peeked out over the carriage houses below and spied 2 carriages being cleaned and mended. In cases where someone's vehicle was in need of serious repairs, they could always switch it out or borrow a new one. Under normal circumstances, normal carriages that entered the city would go straight to the carriage houses to be cleaned, then enter the nobles' quarter through the gate, for nobles located past the temple's front gate. The carriage houses were at their busiest at the height of summer and at the end of autumn, when the most nobles were moving about. During other seasons, their patrons mostly comprised rich commoners. I see another carriage coming toward us, I said. Olaf, should we tell the knights about it? Yeah, if we wait too long, they start getting bombarded with questions. They're bound to lash out at us in return. Most of the carriages that passed through the North Gate contained commoners with business in the nobles' quarter. As it stood, though, we were also having to deal with noble carriages that found themselves blocked at the temple's front gate. The problem had persisted all afternoon. The heck is going on at the temple? When the first carriage had come to our gate, insisting that no guards were stationed at the temple, we soldiers had tried to go there to see for ourselves. The knights had stopped us, though. They had thought it might be a trick, and assured us we should stick to our posts. The North Gate was unique in that it had several knights among those overseeing it. Mere soldiers couldn't act against their orders, so we'd elected to leave all this noble business to them. It can't have helped that the nobles were in the worst mood. They had traveled all the way to be denied at the temple, then treated with suspicion and subjected to an extra inspection upon coming to the North Gate instead. We considered it wise to distance ourselves from both parties. Meanwhile, I want to run straight to the temple and make sure mine's alright. Commander, I think it's about time we go check on the temple, Leckel said. Do you think it's safe? Only a fool would assume there isn't something strange going on there. Spurred into action by Leckel, I went downstairs to report that another carriage was headed toward us and to request permission to investigate the temple. Uncooperative nobles were explosively outraged with the knights. I did not come here by choice, the most furious of the nobles said. The temple gate being closed meant this was my only option. If you oppose my being here, then allow me to pass already. A check is necessary for you to pass to the North Gate, one of the knights replied. The 4 carriages before yours all agreed to our inspection. Even a Gee must cooperate. Truth be told, I thought there were plenty of reasonable solutions to the whole predicament. The frustrated nobles could always enter the city from a temple from the lower city to ask about the absent gatekeepers, wait in the lower city until the guards returned, or simply comply with the knight's inspections. But of course, nobles would never use a gate meant for commoners. They viewed questioning the Grey Priest as beneath them. They refused to wait somewhere as disgusting as the lower city, and they sincerely thought the knight's precautions were an act of unthinkable insolence. I got that using the gate for commoners is embarrassing and all, but come on, this is such a pain. Sir Knight, I called. What now? He turned and shot me an irritated glare, but I wasn't about to back down. There's another carriage on the way. May I receive permission to go to the temple and investigate the cause of the disturbance? I mean, you need to know what's going on. If there's nobody at the gate, then it's just going to get worse for y'all, so it's best to figure out what's going on over there, fix it, and then they can go back and go through like they planned. The knight shouted at me to drop the subject at the same time that the noble told me to quit slacking and go already. The latter glared at the former, and an awkward silence hung over the pair. I assumed the noble had the higher status because the knight soon apologized. I would not have come to this commoner gate if my usual means of entry were available to me, the noble said. You, soldier, go to the temple and drag out the guards. I shall prepare to return to its gate. Understood, I said. I will go to the temple, inform them of the problem, and request that replacement guards be stationed at the gate. Having at last secured the excuse I needed, I darted past the bitter knights and nobles and sprinted toward the temple. I ran past the carriages and checked at the temple's front gate where it was closed. Then I rushed to the gate on the lower city side. Ah, there you are! I spotted Grey Priests right by the temple's gate. They must have stepped away for a moment on some unexpected business. It probably had something to do with unreasonable nobles. I was well aware of how they treated commoners and priests. Hey, I called. We've been told there weren't guards stationed at the gate. What happened? I recognized almost everyone from the orphanage thanks to my time spent helping them visit the forest and prepare for winter, not to mention my trips to Haas. They weren't used to loud voices or violence, so I did my best to speak calmly. Ah, Master Gunther, one of the Grey Priests said. The previous guards were absent when we came to relieve them of their post. That's all we know. The priests had just arrived, and they seemed just as confused as we were. Asking them more questions would only be a waste of time. I decided to get right out of there. I don't blame you, but we've got some angry nobles stuck at the North Gate because of all this, I explained. Get ready for 2 of their carriages to ride back to back. We apologize for the trouble. I turned on my heel and ran to the North Gate, where I told the driver of the frontmost nearby carriage that the temple's guards were back. He must have been pretty worn down by all the arguing at the gate because he headed straight to the temple looking relieved. Whew, glad that's all settled. I took a breather in the North Gate's break room, thankful that nothing major had gone wrong. The temple was mine's home in a way. I didn't want any trouble there. Something out of the ordinary could easily have snowballed. We had just resumed our usual business when all of us burst into the room. Gunther, knights that came by Highbeast are calling for you. I raced up the stairs without a second thought. It must have been urgent for them to have asked for me instead of the other knights. Lord Daniel, Lady Angelica. I recognized the knights who had summoned me. They were mine's guards. Lord Daniel had been with mine since she was an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden. He'd walked her home from the temple and even fought a noble from another duchy to keep her safe. He was still protecting her now that she was Lady Rosemine, and we'd spoken during our trip to Haas. As for Lady Angelica, though I'd seen her at Haas's monastery and at mine's side, I'd never actually interacted with her. I only knew her name because mine had used it. In truth, I was a little relieved to recognize the pair. They weren't the kind of people to give unreasonable demands. At the same time, though, I straightened my back. Lady Rosemine's guard knights had come here for a reason. Has something happened with Lady Rosemine, I asked. Good insight, Lord Damiel replied. Angelica, activate Stenlook. Right. Lady Angelica placed a hand on her sword, and a bolt of tension shot through me. As a soldier, I wouldn't stand a chance against her. I put my hands together to resist the impulse to draw my own weapon. But to my surprise, her blade remained at her waist. She kept her hand on its hilt and declared that she was ready. I didn't know what for, but Lord Damiel nodded and began his explanation. Earlier today, when Lady Rosamund and Lord Ferdinand were both absent, 4 guards were kidnapped from the temple's gate. The perpetrator's objective seems to have been to infiltrate the High Bishop's quarters. We found traces of their presence. Lord Ferdinand predicts it was the work of nobles convinced that nobody would notice the disappearance of a few Grey Priests. I clenched my fist and swallowed a shout. It never ended. Nobles were putting mine in danger again. Lord Damiel must have noticed my grimace because an extremely slight smile reached his grey eyes. Worry not, he said. Nothing happened to Lady Rosamund. I was deeply relieved to hear that mine wasn't hurt. We request your aid in rescuing the 4 priests and locating those who disturbed the High Bishop's chambers, Lord Damiel continued. Your orders are to mobilize the lower city's forces, gather eyewitness accounts, and bring us any information you can find on suspicious carriages or wagons. Lord Damiel then made a cutting motion with his hand, which prompted Lady Angelica to release her sword. I thought that was strange, but he spoke again before I could think much about it. Gunther, Lady Rosamund said that you would act quickly upon learning of our situation. I trust you will do her proud. Mine had so many high-status nobles in her guard, but still she was counting on me. She thought we soldiers were better suited to the task of gathering this intel. And what kind of father would I be if I didn't prove her right? Noble carriages started coming to the north gate after 4th bell, each reporting the lack of guards at the temple's gate, I said. We allowed 4 through the north gate and 2 returned to the temple's gate, where the change of guards arrived. There was no suspicious elements within said carriages. And the carriages that entered the city in general? Well, we need to contact the other gates. I didn't want to repeat our mistake of letting a noble from another duchy into the city. It was my duty as mine's father to get rid of any criminals who might pose a threat to her. At the very least, I needed to live up to my daughter's expectations, so I turned from Lord Damiel to Aulus. Aulus, you heard all that, right? Split everyone into teams, and gather any eyewitness reports you can on any suspicious carriages that might have been carrying 4 Grey Priests. Lecco, we need to narrow down when the priests were taken. Speak with those who worked the morning shift. Check with the carriage houses and ask about the last carriage they saw going to the temple's front gate. Come to the central meeting room when you're done. Yes, sir. I watched the soldiers speedily disperse before turning back to Lord Damiel. I shall circle the gates and use my authority as commander to order those stationed there to assist us. Let us take care of that. Our high beasts travel much faster than you can run. Angelica is using stem like an option. I'll try. Again, Lady Angelica touched the hilt of her sword. I almost grabbed my own weapon in response, but then her blade began to speak. It repeated Lord Damiel's explanation word for word. What in the... Had that sword really spoken? And in the High Priest's voice of all things. Lord Damiel said it would do a fine job of bringing the other gates up to speed, and Lady Angelica nodded in agreement, declaring that she would leave the explaining to Stenlook. I wasn't so sure about their plan. I was better accustomed to magic tools than most soldiers, but even I couldn't believe what was happening. Does he really want to let her loose like that? The others are going to fall over themselves. All right, Angelica, you take the west gate. I'll go to the east. We can reunite at the south. Wait a moment, I cried. Please bring me with you. If an unfamiliar knight shows up and suddenly moves to draw her sword, the soldiers will be too shocked to listen. Lord Damiel paused, as if contemplating something. Would they not know us from spring prayer and the harvest festival? Only a small portion of the soldiers accompany Lady Rosamund to Haas. Not every commander will recognize you as I did. I only knew Lord Damiel because he once kept mine safe on our way home from the temple, and because we'd fought together against a noble from the duchy. He and Lady Angelica weren't known widely enough for an average soldier to see them and think, they're Lady Rosamund's guard knights. In that case, let us use the opportunity to introduce ourselves. Gunther, if you would. Understood. I was allowed to ride with Lord Damiel on his high beast. He took us from the north gate to the top of the east gate, which was closer to us than the others. I wished Effa could have seen me, or maybe that Lord Damiel had brought mine with him. Never in my life had I looked more like a genuine knight. Still, I pushed those feelings down and gave stern instructions to the first guard we came across. I am Gunther, commander of the north gate. I'm here with orders from the High Bishop. Assemble the east gate's commander and captains. Yes, sir. The guard was shocked to see the knight's high beast, but ran off without another word. He was going to call for his commander in exactly the same way that Aulus had called for me. I soon heard footsteps racing up the stairs. Please meet Lord Damiel and Lady Angelica, knights serving as the High Bishop Lady Rosamund's personal guards, I said. They might visit again in cases where the High Bishop needs the soldier's aid. Thank you for introducing them. The East Gate's commander told me he must have guessed that I was here purely for that reason. I nodded in response, at which point he knelt before the 2 nobles. Lord Daniel explained the situation and conveyed Lady Rosemine's orders. I waited for him to finish, then reiterated the importance of speaking to the soldiers who'd worked the morning shift. 6 carriages marked with noble crests had passed through the east gate today, and none were suspicious, huh? Once you've learned what you can, I said, come to the central meeting room for a briefing between commanders. Our next destination was the south gate. As soon as we explained ourselves, the commander told us about a suspicious horse-drawn wagon. The guards on duty heard bumping coming from the back. They ordered the driver to show them his cargo, but he flashed a noble ring and continued on his way. The commander then turned to one of the captains, who nodded him support. I was there, he said. The wagon was crestless, and though the noble's ring wasn't large enough, for us to make out any details, it was real without a doubt. Rather than a bead, it bore a vivid gemstone that swayed with color. Some of us wondered whether it was stolen. That really was suspicious. I exchanged a look with Lord Daniel. Do you know where that wagon came from, he asked. Not exactly, but it came to the gate from Craftsman's Alley. Can you tell us when you saw it? It's been about as long as an apprentice study session. Lord Daniel furrowed his brow, unsure what the commander meant. I couldn't expect a knight to understand a soldier's way of speaking. He means as long as a child could study without getting bored, I noted. In other words, he saw the wagon very recently. What? Daniel, should we go? Lady Angelica asked, stepping forward without missing a beat and uttering her first words since we'd arrived. She looked ready to leave in an instant, but Lord Daniel quickly intervened. No, Angelica, he barked. We were ordered to gather intelligence. We should start our pursuit only once we follow Lady Rosemine's instructions. Understood, Lady Angelica replied. She lowered her shoulders in disappointment, but kept her blue eyes sharply focused on the bland past the south gate. I'd never expected a noblewoman to exude the air of a deadly fighter. Still, her devotion to rescuing the great priest at mine's orders meant a lot to me. Normally, a noble wouldn't even think about saving people from the temple. I wanted to do everything I could to help Lord Daniel and Lady Angelica. Mine's orders played a huge part in that, of course, but it was also true that the 2 knights in front of me were far better equipped to rescue the kidnapped priests. We soldiers couldn't soar through the air for one thing. The pair also refused to look down on commoners or grey priests, which was something I respected them for. If my aim was to be useful, then the best thing I could do was ensure the information we gathered got to mine as quickly as possible. No noble carriages came through the south gate. Check for more eyewitness reports of them or any suspicious wagons. We're to gather in the central meeting room once we're done. For now, let's leave the rest of the soldiers here and make for the west gate. We repeated our explanation at the west gate. One of the captains looked up at the star and raised a hand. The soldiers on the morning shift saw a suspicious carriage. Really? Yes, before 3rd bell. It was the sort of plain carriage a rich commoner would use, while it was being driven by the kind of arrogant attendant who usually served nobles. In short, the carriage had contained nobles acting as commoners. There were telltale signs, no matter how much they might have looked the part. That must be the carriage The carriage we're looking for, Daniel said. It aligns with the intel we gathered from the south gate. Bring the soldiers who work the morning shift when you come to the central meeting room, I said. For good measure, check to see if anyone else saw our target. Can I ask how many other noble carriages came through here? 4 today. None were suspicious. Once I'd given out a few instructions and performed the bare minimum of my checks, I returned my attention to the knights. Lord Daniel, Lady Angelica, I would ask that you consider going back to the temple. Temple while we continue the investigation. It might be best to consult Lady Rosemine, then chase the wagon from the south gate. Indeed, that might be wise, Lord Daniel said, but we gathered more information than expected with a single sweep. We might learn even more valuable intel if we stay a bit longer. Lord Daniel was a cautious man, it seemed. He wanted as much information as he could get before returning to his charge. He was a noble, but I still remembered seeing him when he was only a youngster. The look on his face had told me he was a devoted knight, dedicated to protecting mine. That was why I felt comfortable voicing my thoughts. I must stress that the suspicious wagon is getting further away as we speak. The longer we wait, the greater the risk that we won't find it. I will deliver our intelligence to the temple myself if necessary. I ask only that the great priests are rescued as soon as possible. Lady Rosemary will be devastated if we lose them. Well put, Lord Daniel said, and leaped onto his high beast without questioning me in the slightest. As always, he took even a commoner's warning with the utmost seriousness. He might have gotten older, but his personality and mindset had stayed the same. Gunther, I entrust the work here to you, he declared. Angelica, let us depart. Understood. I ran around town, coordinated with merchants who were also gathering information, and learned what I could about the suspicious carriage. Then I took my findings to the temple as a soldier's representative. I wasn't fortunate enough to see mine, but Gil informed me that the priest had been rescued without incident. As I understand it, the high priest was shocked that commoners could gather so much intel, Gil told me, mentioning some of what he'd heard from the equally surprised noble retainer speaking in the high priest's chambers. Or high bishop's chamber, sorry. One of the rescue priests stepped forward. We were told that we were only able to be saved because of the information gathered from the gates. It was your support, Master Gunther, that spurred the soldiers to provide their aid. Please allow us to express our gratitude. We did not think anyone would go to such lengths to rescue a Grey Priest such as ourselves, said another. He and the others were expressing a chill for reassurance. Their smiles made me proud to have helped them. Ah, mine really is doing a fine job. Her voice and our promise suddenly rang through my mind. I'll always be your daughter. I'll protect the city and you and everyone. The sight before me was proof that mine was keeping her promise and working hard as both the High Bishop and the Orphanage Director. My little girl, who had once trembled in fear at the thought of spending winter in the temple, had grown enough to lead her retainers in a charge to rescue the kidnapped Grey Priest. That's my daughter for you. For some reason, seeing the priest so elated brought a tear to my eye. Okay. I think I'm going to end this one off here. I'll see you guys in the next one.